Hey there, and welcome back to Stoic Minds. I'm Dr. Sophia Carter, and today we're going to talk about something that's been shrouded in mystery, confusion, and frankly, a lot of misinformation for decades. We're talking about the G-spot, and more importantly, we're going to discuss why 99.9% of men don't actually know where it really is or how it actually works. Now, before we dive in, let me be clear about why I'm covering this topic on a channel that's primarily focused on men's health. Understanding female pleasure and anatomy isn't just about being a better lover, though that's certainly part of it. It's about creating deeper intimacy in your relationships, which directly impacts your own satisfaction, your relationship quality, and believe it or not, even your own sexual health and confidence. I've been practicing medicine for over 20 years, and I can't tell you how many couples I've worked with where the sexual relationship has deteriorated not because of physical problems, but because of fundamental misunderstandings about anatomy and pleasure. Men feel frustrated and inadequate because they can't figure out what their partner wants. Women feel frustrated and disconnected because their needs aren't being met, and this creates a cycle of avoidance, resentment, and declining intimacy that affects every aspect of the relationship. So, let's clear up the confusion once and for all, starting with what the G-spot actually is and where it's really located. The G-spot, named after Dr. Ernst Greffenberg, who first described it in the 1950s, isn't actually a separate anatomical structure like a button or a specific organ. This is the first thing most people get wrong. They're looking for some magical spot that you can just press and instantly create pleasure. But the reality is much more interesting, and once you understand it, much more useful. The G-spot is actually the internal portion of the clitoral complex. Now, let me explain what that means, because this is where everything starts to make sense. Most people think of the clitoris as just that small external button at the top of the vulva, but that visible part called the glans is actually just the tip of a much larger structure. The clitoris extends internally with two arms called the cura that reach back into the pelvis, and two bulbs called the vestibular bulbs that sit on either side of the vaginal opening. When you understand this anatomy, the G-spot suddenly makes perfect sense. The G-spot is the area on the front wall of the vagina, about 2 to 3 inches inside, where you can stimulate the internal structures of the clitoris through the vaginal wall. It's not a separate thing. It's indirect stimulation of the clitoral complex from the inside. Now, here's where the location confusion comes in and why most men are looking in the wrong place or approaching it in the wrong way. The exact location and sensitivity of this area varies significantly from woman to woman. Some women have a very pronounced area that's extremely sensitive. Others have a more diffuse area that requires different types of stimulation. Some women find G-spot stimulation intensely pleasurable, while others find it uncomfortable or just not particularly interesting. This variation is completely normal, and it's why the advice to just find the G-spot is overly simplistic and often counterproductive. What works for one woman might do absolutely nothing for another, or worse, might be uncomfortable. This is why communication with your partner is absolutely essential, and why you need to approach this as an exploration rather than a mission to find a specific target. Let me walk you through the actual anatomy and location in detail. If you imagine your partner lying on her back and you're facing her, the G-spot area is on the front wall of the vagina. That's the wall that's toward her belly button, not toward her back. Insert your finger about 2 to 3 inches inside and curl it upward in a come here motion. You should feel an area that has a slightly different texture than the surrounding tissue. It might feel slightly rigid or spongy, almost like the roof of your mouth. But here's the crucial part that most advice leaves out. This area isn't automatically sensitive or pleasurable. In fact, when a woman isn't aroused, stimulating this area can feel like nothing at all, or it can even be uncomfortable, creating a sensation similar to needing to urinate. This is because the skin's glands, which are sometimes called the female prostate, are located in this area, and they're structurally similar to the male prostate. The key to understanding G-spot stimulation is understanding arousal. As a woman becomes aroused, blood flows to the entire genital area. The clitoral complex becomes engorged. The vaginal walls become lubricated and the tissues become more sensitive. The G-spot area swells and becomes more pronounced as arousal increases. This is why trying to stimulate the G-spot at the beginning of sexual activity before adequate arousal has occurred is often ineffective or uncomfortable. Think of arousal as a progression, not a light switch. Most women need significant warm-up time before G-spot stimulation becomes pleasurable. This might mean 10, 15, 20 minutes or more of other types of stimulation first. External clitoral stimulation, kissing, touching other erogenous zones, building anticipation and connection. All of this creates the physiological arousal that makes G-spot stimulation pleasurable. Now, let's talk about technique, because even when you find the right location, how you stimulate this area matters tremendously. The most common mistake men make is treating G-spot stimulation like a jackhammer. Rapid, hard, repetitive motion is rarely what works best. Despite what you might have seen in adult content, most women respond better to firm, consistent pressure rather than rapid movement. Using your fingers, which gives you the most control and feedback, apply steady pressure to the G-spot area while making slow, deliberate movements. The classic come-here motion can work well, but so can circular motions, side-to-side motions, or even just holding steady pressure while your partner moves or adjusts her position. Pay attention to feedback. And I don't just mean verbal feedback, though. That's important too. Watch her body language. Notice her breathing. Feel how her muscles respond. If she's tensing up or pulling away, you're either not in the right spot or you're using too much pressure. If she's relaxing into it, breathing more deeply, making sounds of pleasure, or moving toward your touch, you're on the right track. Here's something else that's crucial. G-spot stimulation often works best in combination with other types of stimulation, not in isolation. Many women find that simultaneous external clitoral stimulation and internal G-spot stimulation creates a more intense and satisfying experience than either alone. This makes sense when you understand the anatomy. You're stimulating different parts of the same complex structure from different angles. The position also matters significantly, and this is another area where most advice falls short. Different sexual positions provide different angles of access to the G-spot area. Positions where the woman is on top give her control over the angle and depth of penetration, which allows her to find what feels best. Positions where she's on her stomach or in a modified doggy-style position can create a better angle for G-spot contact with the penis. Positions where her hips are elevated, like placing a pillow under her pelvis during missionary position, can also improve the angle. But here's what's really important to understand. For many women, the most intense pleasure doesn't come from the G-spot at all. The external clitoris is typically far more sensitive and more reliably produces pleasure and orgasm than internal stimulation alone. Research shows that about 70 to 80% of women require direct clitoral stimulation to reach orgasm. Only about 18 to 25% of women report being able to orgasm from penetration alone. This doesn't mean G-spot stimulation isn't valuable. It absolutely can be, and for some women, it's incredibly important. But the idea that you need to master G-spot stimulation to be a good lover, or that something is wrong if your partner doesn't respond intensely to it, is simply not true. Every woman is different, and what matters most is figuring out what works for your specific partner, not trying to apply some universal technique. Let me talk about something else that's often misunderstood: the relationship between G-spot stimulation and female ejaculation, sometimes called squirting. Some women, when experiencing intense G-spot stimulation, release fluid from the skin's glands. This fluid is different from vaginal lubrication and different from urine, though it may contain trace amounts of urine since it passes through the urethra. Not all women experience this, and that's completely normal. Some women do and find it pleasurable. Some women do and feel embarrassed about it, and some women never experience it at all. There's enormous pressure on both men and women around this phenomenon, with men feeling like they should be able to make it happen, and women feeling like they should be able to do it. But the reality is that it's just one variation of normal sexual response, not a gold standard that everyone should be achieving. If your partner does experience female ejaculation, the most important thing is to respond positively and without judgment. Put a towel down beforehand if it's something that happens regularly. Don't make a big deal out of it either way. The less pressure and anxiety around any aspect of sex, the better the experience will be for both of you. Now, let's talk about something that goes beyond just technique and anatomy, the psychological and emotional components of pleasure. The G-spot and female pleasure in general aren't just about physical stimulation. A woman's ability to relax, feel safe, be present, and surrender to sensation is enormously important. Many women carry tension, stress, anxiety, and self-consciousness into sexual encounters. They're worried about how they look, whether they're taking too long, whether they're doing it right, whether their partner is getting bored or frustrated. All of this mental and emotional noise makes it nearly impossible to fully experience pleasure, no matter how skilled the stimulation. Creating an environment where your partner feels completely safe, accepted, and free from judgment is often more important than perfect technique. This means taking your time, showing genuine enthusiasm for her pleasure, reassuring her that you're enjoying yourself regardless of how long things take or exactly what happens, and staying present and connected rather than being focused on an end goal. The best lovers aren't the ones with the most techniques or the most experience. They're the ones who are genuinely attentive, responsive, and focused on their partner's experience rather than their own performance. They're patient, they're curious, they ask questions, they pay attention to feedback, they adjust based on what they're learning, and most importantly, they make their partner feel desired, appreciated, and safe. Let me share some practical advice for exploration and communication, because this is where the real magic happens. Instead of going into sexual activity with a goal of finding the G-spot or making something specific happen, approach it as a curious exploration. You might say to your partner something like, "I'd love to explore what feels good for you. Can we take some time where I try different types of touch and you give me feedback about what you're experiencing?" This takes the pressure off both of you. It frames the experience as learning and discovery rather than as a test that you might pass or fail. During the exploration, encourage her to give you detailed feedback. Not just that feels good or that doesn't work, but descriptions of what she's experiencing. That creates a warm sensation. That feels too intense right now. That feels good, but not quite in the right spot. That pressure is perfect. This kind of detailed feedback allows you to calibrate your touch much more effectively than guessing or trying to read subtle signals, and it gets her more engaged in her own pleasure and more attuned to what her body is experiencing, which enhances the experience for her as well. You should also encourage her to show you what she likes. Many women pleasure themselves in ways that work for their bodies, and watching or feeling how she touches herself can give you invaluable information. There's no shame or inadequacy in this. It's just gathering information about what works for her specific body. Another important point, women's responses can vary significantly based on where they are in their menstrual cycle, their stress levels, how tired they are, what medications they're taking, and countless other factors. Something that felt amazing last week might not feel particularly good today, and that's completely normal. This is why ongoing communication is so important, not just one-time exploration. Let's also address age-related changes, because this is a men's health channel, and many of our viewers are in relationships with partners who are also aging. As women go through menopause, hormonal changes affect the genital tissues. There may be less natural lubrication, tissues may become thinner and more sensitive, and arousal may take longer or require different types of stimulation. These changes are normal and don't mean that satisfying sexual intimacy isn't possible. They just mean that you need to adapt. Use plenty of high-quality lubricant. Take more time for arousal. Be especially gentle and attentive to feedback. Focus on the emotional connection and intimacy as much as the physical sensations. Many couples actually report that their sexual intimacy improves with age because they're less focused on performance and more focused on genuine connection and mutual pleasure. It's also worth noting that many of the same health factors that affect male sexual function also affect female sexual function. Cardiovascular health, diabetes, medications, stress, sleep quality, and overall physical health all impact sexual response. Supporting your partner's overall health and well-being is supporting your sexual relationship together. Now, I want to address something that's often left out of these discussions: the importance of variety and creativity. Even when you figured out what works reliably for your partner, doing exactly the same thing every time can become routine and less exciting. Sexual intimacy benefits from variety, spontaneity, and playfulness. This doesn't mean you need to constantly try elaborate new positions or complicated techniques. It can be as simple as changing the setting, the time of day, the pace, the order of activities, or the level of communication during the experience. Sometimes slow and sensual is perfect. Sometimes faster and more urgent is what's desired. The key is staying engaged and present rather than falling into autopilot mode. Even if you're doing something you've done 100 times before, you can bring fresh attention and presence to the experience that makes it feel new and exciting. Let me also talk about the role of anticipation and build-up. Sexual intimacy doesn't have to start in the bedroom. Building anticipation throughout the day through texts, touches, looks, or verbal suggestions can significantly enhance the eventual physical experience. When a woman has been thinking about and anticipating intimacy, her body is already beginning the arousal process before any physical touch happens. This is particularly important as relationships mature and you've been together for years or decades. The novelty that creates automatic excitement in new relationships fades, and you need to intentionally create anticipation and excitement. A text in the middle of the day saying, "I've been thinking about you all day and I can't wait to be close to you tonight," can be incredibly effective at building arousal and anticipation. Physical affection throughout the day that isn't always leading to sex also builds the foundation for better sexual intimacy. Regular non-sexual touch creates comfort with physical closeness and builds what I call touch trust, where your partner doesn't feel like every touch is a demand for sex, but rather an expression of affection and connection. Now, let's talk about something that often gets overlooked: the recovery and connection period after sexual activity. What happens immediately after orgasm or after sexual activity ends is important for the overall experience and for your partner's satisfaction. Many men after orgasm want to immediately roll over and go to sleep or get up and move on to the next activity. But women often need and desire continued physical closeness and emotional connection after sexual activity. Taking time to hold your partner, to express affection, to talk about the experience, or just about anything else while remaining physically close creates a sense of emotional safety and satisfaction that's important for her overall sexual fulfillment. This after R, as it's sometimes called, signals that the sexual activity wasn't just about physical release, but about connection and intimacy. Research has shown that couples who engage in affectionate behavior after sexual activity report higher relationship satisfaction and sexual satisfaction than couples who immediately disconnect after sex. This is particularly important for women who tend to experience more emotional processing after sexual activity than men do. I also want to address performance anxiety because it affects both partners. Men often feel pressure to perform, to last long enough, to make their partner orgasm, to do everything right. This anxiety can actually impair erectile function and reduce presence and enjoyment. Women often feel pressure to orgasm quickly, to respond the right way, to not take too long, to make their partner feel successful. All of this pressure is counterproductive. The best sexual experiences happen when both partners can relax, be present, and focus on connection and pleasure rather than performance and outcomes. Talking openly about this pressure and consciously deciding to let it go can dramatically improve your sexual relationship. You might have conversations with your partner about taking orgasm off the table as a goal, sometimes just exploring pleasure for its own sake without any pressure to climax or achieve any particular outcome. This can be incredibly liberating and often paradoxically leads to more intense experiences because the pressure and anxiety are removed. Let me also mention the importance of general relationship health on sexual intimacy. Unresolved conflicts, resentment, lack of emotional connection, and poor communication in daily life all show up in the bedroom. You can have all the technique in the world, but if the emotional foundation of your relationship isn't healthy, sexual intimacy will suffer. This is why I always encourage couples to invest in their overall relationship, not just focus on the sexual aspect. Regular quality time together, meaningful conversations, acts of appreciation and kindness, working through conflicts constructively, and maintaining friendship and respect all contribute to better sexual intimacy. Finally, I want to emphasize that everything I've shared today is general information and guidance. Every woman is unique, and what works for one may not work for another. The most important skill you can develop is attentiveness to your specific partner, willingness to communicate openly, and flexibility to adjust based on feedback and changing circumstances. Don't approach sexual intimacy like you're following a recipe, where if you just do steps 1 through 10 correctly, you'll get the desired result. Approach it as an ongoing conversation, a dance where you're constantly tuning into your partner and adjusting your movements based on hers. This responsiveness and presence is far more valuable than memorizing techniques. Thanks so much for sticking with me through this comprehensive discussion. If you found this valuable, please subscribe to Senior Men's Health for more content about relationships, intimacy, and overall wellness as you age. Until next time, this is Dr. Sophia Carter reminding you that great intimacy comes from genuine connection, open communication, and the willingness to keep learning about your partner throughout your relationship. Ship.